try and incite something. They are going to attempt to do this. We want to let the police know they made a choice to do nothing. They made a choice not to even try to separate the protesters and counter-protesters. From that point on, as we led the rally, as one of the people who was arrested, Dave Schneider, was emceeing the rally, he informed people, he called to ignore the counter-protesters and there to get our message out. At that point, the counter-protesters came closer, closer, and closer, began to bump up against some of our the protesters who were there, began to scream in the faces of the speakers, and when they couldn't get close enough from the front, they ran around the back. While folks were staying on a ledge, there was a fear that some of the counter-protesters might push them off the ledge. They began to shout and get a bump up against some of the speakers. They began to hit people with the flag that they had. At that point, we continued, especially Dave Schneider, the MC, continued to tell the crowd to ignore the counter-protesters. We were there for a message, right? We were there to oppose the war. At the point at which the counter-protesters got so in our face, the police felt the need to interject themselves. They did something very specific. When they ran at the center of attention, at the speaker, Connell Crooms, who was in the process of trying to give a speech over the shouts of the counter-protesters, the police ran right by the counter-protesters and ran right for Connell Crooms, ignoring everyone else, ignoring all the counter-protesters attempting to instigate us and failing to instigate us. We did a successful job of ignoring them, of keeping calm and peaceful. It's exactly what we set out to do at the beginning. They ran right past the counter-protesters and right at the speaker of the rally. This was a deaf man who screamed out, his mouth covered in blood, screaming out to the police, "I'm deaf. I can't understand you," as they threw him to the ground, as they beat him senseless in the face, as they beat him in the kidney, as they held a taser to his back. They beat his head so hard, his hearing aid, which is very far implanted into his ear, popped out of his head. They beat him so hard, as they drug him to the police cruiser, he fell unconscious, he was dragged into the police cruiser. They beat him so hard that as we began to go to the jail to figure out what had happened to our 4 and 5 arrested folks from the protest, we saw him being dragged limp from the police cruiser to an ambulance. We were terrified. We looked at him, we thought the worst. We thought the police had possibly killed the speaker of our rally, Connell Crooms, someone who did everything he could to de-escalate the situation, and yet was purposely targeted and attacked by the police. As this was happening, we had several other folks who were brutalized by the police, while the counter-protesters stood there, unmolested by the police, getting as closer than any of us to what was occurring, and close enough that they could get the best evidence of what was occurring, because the police allowed them to go close while keeping us away. The police then began to brutalize 3 other people, Christina Kittle, they began to brutalize Tom Beckham, and Willie Wilder. Well, Willie Wilder, I'll say this, is a 74-year-old Vietnam veteran. He was there to remember Veterans for Peace. Veterans for Peace. He was there to be peaceful, right? And he was punched several times in the face, full force, by the police, put in a chokehold, thrown to the ground. This happened to all the protesters. The last arrest that occurred was Dave Schneider, the guy who had taken it upon himself after working 2 jobs that day, after acting as a union steward at UPS, defending and representing people on the job, doing it out of his own free will, all his own free time, going to work a second job, and then coming out to lead a protest, tired as can be. They arrested him as he walked away. The reason they gave was because he had led the protest. We did not know that was a crime to lead a peaceful protest until yesterday. And now we know that the police are trying to charge people for that. This is a specific attack amongst the rights of free speech of protesters to speak out. In fact, I'll say this, it's an attack amongst any citizen of this country, right to speak out amongst anything they think is right. Regardless of what you're speaking out against, you defend your right to free speech. That was not respected yesterday by the provocateurs, who did everything they could, to try and wreck our rally, and yet we remained calm. And then it was disrupted by the police, who arrested 5 of our compatriots and beat one of them unconscious and sent 2 of them to the hospital, right? So I'm going to start to introduce a few of the speakers we have today. We have some family members, we have some folks who were there. But the first person I'm introducing, her name is Ellen Schneider, right? Her name is Ellen Schneider, and she's going to talk about, she's the sister of Dave Schneider. She drove down from Atlanta to be here. She's going to talk about what happened when she got to the pretrial detention facility, how she was treated there. She's going to talk about what are, and she'll reiterate why it's so important that our demands are that the police immediately release all the protesters who were arrested on trumped-up charges, that they drop all the charges, and that we launch an investigation into JSO's targeting, misconduct, and targeting of protesters. I've never seen the brutality that I saw yesterday. I've never seen it in my life. There was no reason for it to occur. It was completely unnecessary. We came out to have a peaceful protest. Talked about what happened to her and about her brother David Schneider, arrested on reason of leading a protest. Never seen it before in my life. Ellen Schneider.
Yeah.
Good afternoon, everyone. As Richard said, my name is Ellen Schneider. I am the younger sister of Dave Schneider. Normally, it's the other Schneider here doing these sorts of speeches, but I will have to make do today. As Richard mentioned, I live in Atlanta, Georgia, and drove down this morning. And I'm here to speak to the experience that I had at the pretrial detention center just a few hours ago. When I arrived, I had heard from some of the individuals already on site that I had the best chance of getting into the courtroom, seeing as they had been told that it needed to be an immediate family member with the same last name. So luckily, me and Dave do share a last name. So I approached the pretrial detention center. The doors were locked, but one of the staff members there opened the door and asked if I was an immediate family member. I clarified yes, that my name was Ellen Schneider. I was a sister of Dave Schneider. They let me in. They allowed me to go through security, and then opened the door for me to go into the courtroom. So after saying hello to some friends and family members that were already on site, I made my way into the courtroom. When they opened up the door, they asked once again for my name. I clarified that my name was Ellen Schneider. I have my ID ready to show if needed to validate that. I entered into the courtroom. None of the individuals who we're discussing today were in that courtroom at the moment. I believe it was another group going through at that moment. But almost immediately I was, by the same person who allowed me into the room, was asked to step outside. They asked me my name again, and then asked me to step outside of the courtroom wing entirely. And then they clarified that it was only to be parents allowed in. So as you can imagine, we're all a little confused by that, seeing as I believe none of the arrested individuals yesterday are juveniles. So the specification that it should be a parent, as Richard mentioned, one of the individuals arrested was 70 years old. So the requirement that it needed to be a parent is a little confusing. But then after some continuous questioning of the Sheriff's Department's representatives on the site, they clarified that the facility had been put on lockdown at some point and no one was allowed in, and that we all needed to leave. So as you can imagine, as someone who got up at 3:30 this morning to head down here, I was certainly upset, but I was more just confused because the policy seemed to change extremely quickly, and as you can imagine, I had only had a few cups of coffee, so I was just trying to process what was even going on. But real quickly, I just want to speak to the person that my brother is. When I knew that this had occurred, my first reaction was to pack up my car and get on the road, mainly because I know, and I'm sure everyone standing behind me who's met Dave knows that he would do the exact same if the roles were reversed. He is the most compassionate person I know, has a true heart for people, and the causes he supports, he does so wholeheartedly. I'm very proud to be a sister, and I'm very fortunate to be here today with so many of his friends and our family, and just wanted to share with you the personal experience I had this morning at the pre-trial detention center. So I'm going to leave it to the rest of the speakers to clarify the demands, but thank you very much, and thank you.
Yeah! Yeah!
I really want to thank Ellen for being such a great sister to drive down from Atlanta on snap notice with her brother. Was denied entry, but she's still going to be for him. She's going to pick him up when he gets released from jail. He's going to be paid days bail. We're going to be paying all the protesters bail. So next up we have Wells Todd, who's actually the uncle of Dave Schneider, but is also a main organizer in Jacksonville with the Jacksonville Progressive Coalition. He was up close and personal for everything that happened yesterday. He's going to go a little bit over some of the protesters who were arrested and what they've been doing.
I want to first say that yesterday citizens gathered in Hemming Park to protest the stepped up violence that's occurring against the Syrian population. We were there to protest Donald Trump's missile attack. The last time we gathered was here in front of this courthouse to protest his immigration policy. Donald Trump is what a hypocrite looks like. He cries crocodile tears over the children that are dying in Syria, but will not allow these children to enter this country, our country. He cries crocodile tears while increasing corporate America's military destruction of Syria. If Trump wants to help Syrians, he would lift the refugee ban and fund humanitarian aid.
Yes.
I want to talk about the provocateur, Gary Nix. We found out his real name is. Yesterday he did a couple of things. Pushed a police officer. He hit people with a flag. But he didn't get arrested. He pushed Cornell, who the cops almost beat to death. But he didn't get arrested.
Shame! No! Shame!
He's out free, continuing to post provocative Facebook messages.
No! Shame!
Gary Nix and people like Gary Nix have always been around. We experienced them during the civil rights, human rights movement back in the 60s. We experienced them at the same time the Vietnam anti-war movement was happening. Yes. We experienced them whenever decent people take a stand against violence, exploitation, sexism, racism, We experience them whenever decent people take a stand and speak out against racism and police brutality. Whenever we make a statement, Black Lives Matter. And Gary Nix is a product of corporate indoctrination. Gary has attended peaceful rallies ever since Trump was elected here in Jacksonville. He arrived here in Jacksonville with out-of-state expired license plates on his truck. We informed the police about that. They said there was nothing they could do. He has insinuated himself into private meetings that have been organized by young people who have been speaking out against Trump and those that Trump worked for, the 1%. He showed up here at our rally against Trump's immigration policy. The war